Welcome to the legislative section of YMCA Texas Youth in Government. So what is the legislative section? The legislative section of this program is a comprehensive platform that enables delegates to write bills that would change or improve the lives of Texas citizens. Each delegate has the opportunity to draft their own legislation for consideration, debate, and action at the district and state conferences. At district conference, hearing committees are established to consider each bill and take appropriate action. They engage in detailed discussions and analysis of bills to ensure they are comprehensive and effective. The hearing committee will also provide feedback to participants to help improve their bills. At the state conference, all bills are first heard in a committee, and some bills then advance to be heard again by a larger audience in the House and/or Senate chambers. The committee members at state engage in constructive debates and evaluate the bills and identify their strengths and weaknesses. The bills that pass both chambers are then sent to the youth governor for further consideration. Overall, the legislative section provides participants with unique opportunity to engage in the legislative process, to develop critical thinking, and to learn about the importance of effective communication and collaborations. A few steps are getting started. You'll need to write a bill. You'll need to familiarize yourself with both committee floor debate procedures and General Assembly chamber procedures. You'll need to practice presenting your bill as well as practice asking questions and debating other delegates' bill topics. So let's jump into that a little bit further. How do you write a bill and how do you choose a topic? When writing a bill, it is important to choose a topic that you are passionate about. Consider selecting a specific state issue that you feel strongly about and would like to debate. A bill has 6 parts: the heading, the caption, the definition section, the provisions section, and the effective date clause. A template going into further detail on these sections is provided on our website. The heading identifies the type of measure, and by measure, for example, I mean whether it is a House bill or a Senate bill or another type of bill. Heading also identifies the committee assignment, the bill number, the bill author, the school or delegation of the author, and the district. The only information delegates enter is their name, school or delegation, and their district. The caption of the portion of the bill, placed at the very beginning, expresses the subject of the bill. A caption cannot be amended in any way. It always begins with "and Act 2" and ends with "and declaring an emergency." For example, a bill could be titled "An Act 2 Mandate All Public Schools to Abolish Summer Vacation and Declaring an Emergency." The definition section of the bill is where you will define any words used in the caption, provision, and/or penalties. Only words that are technical, unfamiliar, or ambiguous should be defined. The provisions section of the bill is the most important section. This is where the law itself or any change to an existing law will be stated. If passed, the bill's provisions become part of the Texas state statutes. For this reason, only formal language should be used. Personal opinions should not be expressed in the provisions. The penalty section is optional, depending on the specific nature of the bill. Most bills will need penalties to enforce the law that is being established. Any bill that makes an act a crime must provide a penalty or multiple penalties. The effective date listed on the bill template is the effective date that nearly all bills should use. Since the Youth in Government Youth Legislature meets and adjourns in February or March, the laws would then go into effect in April or May. Some bill subjects would be exceptions to this, however. For example, if your bill changes a course requirement for the public schools in Texas, it would be impossible to add a required course in April or May. Therefore, the effective date for a law like that should be at the beginning of the following school year. It's important to note, before submitting your bill, it must be approved by club leaders and the adult advisor. Additionally, you'll want to make sure that your bill follows the template provided and does not exceed 1 page. Sometimes it may be a bit challenging to choose a topic. Here are some tips and tricks to think about before you get started. First, look for examples in your daily life. Something that causes you to think, this is really affecting me. This is something that really needs to be changed. If nothing comes to mind, we have many resources that can help. In the legislative manual, we have active links of different sources that you can look at and find ideas for your bill. And beyond that, you can also use external resources, like a resource officer at your school, for instance, or local and national news. Overall, use your experiences and your resources around you to spark ideas and choose something that you are passionate about. This is your opportunity to put an idea on paper that could potentially make a change and to present it in front of other people. One last thing to keep in mind are banned topics. Banned topics are topics as it relates to the bills that were passed at the previous state conference. Those topics are now considered banned. The goal is for students to avoid submitting bills that are similar in topic or modified in some way. So how are bills debated? Bills are read and debated in committees. We'll now go through an overview of committee procedures. Now, opening committee, the chair will take roll, set the docket, placing any delegate not present, as well as their clerks and their own bills at the end of the docket. Once the docket is set, they will post this at the front of the room. There are 4 major parts to a bill's presentation: the opening statement, the pro-con debate period, where proponents speak in favor of the bill and opponents speak against the bill, the amendment period, where amendments are changes you think makes the bill better, and finally, the closing statement and vote. Let's start with a bill or resolution being laid out. This is where the clerk will present the bill by reading the author's name and caption. The chair will then ask if the bill author is present. If present, the bill author will come forward. One thing to note is that pro-con debate slips, as well as amendment slips, can be submitted at any time after the bill or resolution has been laid out. Next, we'll go into the author's opening remarks. The standard time allotted for an author's opening remarks is 3 minutes, although this can be changed through a motion, which we'll get into a little bit more later. During the author's opening remarks, the author has the floor and presents in front of the committee, verbally laying out anything they want to about their bill. Most delegates would use this time to emphasize the importance of the bill and proactively try and answer questions other delegates might have about their topic. The author has the right to use all of their allotted time or yield any remaining time that they have to the chair. Next, we would move into the question and answer period, where each question has a time limit of 1 minute per person. At the beginning of the question and answer period, the chair will also announce that pro and con slips are due by the end of this period. One thing to note in general, parliamentary procedure is to be followed for any interaction with the chair, clerk, or bill author. For example, to ask a question to the bill author, a delegate would rise and state, "Honorable Chair." The chair would then answer, "For what purpose does the delegate rise?" After a delegate has been recognized on the floor, the delegate must always state their name, their delegation, and their intent. So to continue in the example, After I've rise and been recognized, I would state, Robbie Moore, Richardson YMCA. I rise to question the bill author. The chair will then ask if the bill author yields. If the bill author agrees, the chair will acknowledge the floor is yours by saying, you will have 1 minute. After a delegate has asked their questions, they may sit down, or they may say, I yield the remainder of my time to the chair. If they just sit down, the chair will automatically say, by the delegate's actions, they have yielded their time to the chair. Question and answer period as a whole is to not go past 7 minutes. Then we would enter into the pro and con debate period. In this section, delegates who have submitted pro-con slips will have the opportunity to voice their reasoning for supporting or not supporting their bill. During this period, there are to be no more than 3 pro speakers and no more than 3 con speakers. Each speaker will have 90 seconds, and each speaker will be chosen by the pro and con slips that were submitted to the chair and clerk, and those will have been shuffled. In committee, all pros go first, and then all con speakers will follow. This is different from chamber or general assembly procedures where you alternate between pro and con speakers. After the pro and con debate period, we would enter into the amendment period. The clerk will shuffle the amendments submitted and select 2. The first amendment author will come forward and speak for 60 seconds on what they are amending in the bill and why. The author of the bill will then have the opportunity to speak for 60 seconds about the amendment, and they will state if they are for it or against it being added to their bill. If the author of the bill is for the amendment, the chair will ask for an opponent of the amendment to speak for 60 seconds. And after that opponent has spoken, we'll then have the amendment authors closing debate for, again, 60 seconds. After that, the chair will call for a vote on the amendment. And after the amendment period, the author of the bill will say their closing summations, which is for 90 seconds. The bill author will then say, I move for favorable recommendation for the bill for House or Senate action. If the bill author doesn't make the motion, another committee member will have to make this motion. Finally, there is a call for a vote on this motion. This is where you will vote on the bill. Floor procedures have different time limits, pro-con slips and amendment speakers, and like I previously mentioned, different order for pro and con speakers than the chamber procedures and General Assembly procedures. You can look at this in more detail and see the differences through the legislative manual on our website. Motions are a very important part of parliamentary procedure. To make a motion in general, a delegate would have to rise and be recognized by the chair. When the delegate is recognized, your intent after stating your name and your delegation would be to make a motion. So for instance, I would rise and say, Honorable Chair. For what purpose does the delegate rise? Robbie Moore, Richardson YMCA. I rise to make a motion. The chair would then clarify by saying, state the nature of your motion. This is where you would state the nature of your motion, and there are several different examples of common motions. For instance, the one we already talked about was concerning favorable recommendation. So if the chair asks me, state the nature of your motion, I would say, concerning favorable recommendation. The chair would then ask me, state your motion. And this is the chair asking me to state specifically what my motion is. My answer to this question would be, I move for favorable recommendation of this bill for House or Senate action. If this were actually in a floor session as opposed to a committee, we would say, I move for this to receive due passage instead of favorable recommendation. Some other common motions are suspension of rules. You can use a motion for the suspension of rules to change time limits, to change the number of amendments or pro and con speakers, and any other example that may come to your mind. Another motion example would be lay on the table subject to call. This motion would be used if the bill author is not currently present. And another example would be a motion for a previous question, which would cause a bill to go straight to the author's closing summation and skip the remainder of the debate procedure. One important thing to note is that the nature of the motion must always agree with the motion itself. And if the motion is recognized, the motion will then be voted on by the members or the delegates within the committee or the floor to see whether or not the motion passes or not. Point of order is another important part of parliamentary procedure. Use a point of order to, whenever there is a breach in the parliamentary procedure within committee. For instance, if there has been a breach in parliamentary procedure, you can stand up and say point of order, where chair will recognize you and say, state your point. One great example of this is if a delegate did not state their name in delegation, they would be out of order. So if you catch that break in parliamentary procedure, you can stand up and point that order out. The chair would then recognize that you are correct and that the delegate is out of order. So may you both please sit down. Finally, a point of inquiry. Use a point of inquiry whenever you have a question or you're confused about a debate procedure and you would like to have an answer from the chair. Simply rise and say point of inquiry, where the chair will say, state your point. An example of this would be, you can ask, is this a debatable motion? And chair would answer you. Here's an example of a pro or con slip. These are available on our website and are available for you to print out and practice using in your clubs. When filling out pro and con slips or amendment slips, always write neatly and always include your name and your delegation. When writing out amendment slips specifically, please be sure to include the line number or line numbers that the amendment is referring to. Here's an example of the amendment form. All right, that is all for today. In summary, I'll go ahead and go over a few specific points. Remember to practice. Practicing your opening statements is really important before you get to a committee, and it's very helpful to go through and know why you are presenting what you're presenting. When it comes to debating, quality of debate is what's more important, not necessarily the quantity of how much you stand up and participate in the debate. Always be respectful and always focus on the topic that is being debated and debate the topic itself, not the speaker or the delegate. Pro and con slips as well as amendment slips can be turned in as soon as the caption is read, and pay attention to when pro and con slips and amendment slips are due by to be turned into. Do not use words like proponency or opponency. Instead, whenever you need to use words like this, rise and say, I rise to speak in favor of this bill, or I rise to speak in opposition or against this bill. Never refer to another delegate by their name, but as delegate or as honorable chair, the previous delegate. And finally, chamber assignments and candidate qualifications can, as well as any other information we've covered today, can be found on our website. I hope this has been a helpful presentation. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to your club advisors or leadership. And with that, I will yield the remainder of my time to the chair. Happy debating, y'all.